What is extremely rare but people think it's very common? A woman's water breaking during pregnancy. It only happens outside of the hospital like 15% of the time, but in the movies it's always the dramatic telling of when a baby is coming. My wife's water broke while she was getting ready for work one morning. Just as she was about to leave she thought she had peed herself but it kept trickling. She put on a pad and dry cloths and went to the hospital out of caution. 15 hours later our son was born. My mom ended up heading to the hospital after getting up to pee in the middle of the night and 20 minutes later yelling to my dad, "I can't stop peeing." When my boy was born they had to manually break the waters. That was like 6 hours after getting to the hospital and about 20 hours after the first mild contractions. Edit. Clarification: I'm the husband in this scenario. And, adding to this, just because the water breaks does not mean the baby is going come shooting out in the next few minutes. You've got time. Hollywood just makes it ridiculous. Update. I get that no one wants to watch 6 hours of labor in a movie. But there's nothing wrong with a realistic portrayal instead of "OMG, the baby is coming now" followed 2 minutes later by pulling out the baby. If it were my movie, I'd show it the way it usually goes, and edit down to something appropriate for the movie. Edit. Hilarious autocorrect from baby to banana has been straightened out. Lol. You're absolutely correct. Movies dramatize the shit out of pregnancy in general. I think the only film I ever saw with a relatively honest portrayal of labor was Juno. I will say however that labor varies widely from woman to woman. My mother had unusually fast labors. She had my sister 3 or 4 hours after the first contraction. During her second pregnancy, her doctor told her to call him as soon as she begins labor because it'll happen fast and he needs to make sure he's there in time. When labor started, the nurses refused to call her doctor because it was the middle of the night and she had 2 hours before the baby came. She checked in at 6:45. Had my brother at 7:15 and with no one else in the room. All that to say, if you're in labor, especially if this is your first time, don't putz around because you think you have hours. You never know. The fit guy laughing at the fat newbie at the gym. When I was fat getting into shape, I got nothing but positive reinforcements from these guys to never give up and keep going. My fat friends were paranoid people and assumed people were laughing at them. In reality, gym goers were just being social and laughing about their conversations. From my experience at the gym, usually people don't really give a shit what you're doing or what your body type is, unless you're either being a dick or being dumb. I don't give a shit if you're fat, thin, tall, or short. Just rack your weights and don't sit texting on a machine you are done using and you're now tied with everyone else for my favorite person in the gym. If the BBC has taught me anything, it would be murders in small British villages. My mum watched a show about 2 gardeners, Rosemary and Thyme, who traveled about gardening and going to flower shows and there was always a murder they solved. And they'd always know more than the police. Bitch, if 2 gardeners keep showing up around murders, they are the prime suspects. I'm gonna go with people actually eating Tide Pods. Probably just a few idiots at the media latched onto. My local news station had a story about it a few days ago, investigating whether retailers were locking laundry detergents now in an attempt to stop people eating them. It was a 10-minute segment, with voiceovers in the background of a clip of a couple dumbasses trying to eat one and promptly spitting it out and vomiting. In the course of about 10 minutes, they played video evidence probably half a dozen times. It was all the same video, and the same 5-second clip from that video, over and over and over. They couldn't find any other proof. Granted, I know YouTube is taking down Tide Pod videos, but I think this was before YouTube's ban, and even if it's after, they had to have tried to find at least one other video, and failed. Edit. Jesus fist fucking Christ, yes I know they're locked up in some stores for theft deterrence, not because of the challenge. I don't need 82 people replying to tell me so. Shark attacks. I live in Perth, Supposedly one of the shark attack capitals of the world. Sure, we see them occasionally. But actual attacks are very rare. People giving away drugs to kids at Halloween. Why would they give away product they could sell? My 12-year-old daughter told me that literally none of the kids in her grade will eat from the pizza place right by our house because the people making the pizza put weed in it. I figure 12 is old enough to learn that nobody is giving away weed. That shit ain't free. This past Halloween, one of my FB friends put up the scare share warning parents to make sure that people haven't given your kids ecstasy in their bags. Ain't no damn body going to give a kid a $20 trick or treat gift. Based on movies, I'd say architects. Every professional worker in movies is an architect who goes to work every day with rolled up drawings hoping they're ready for the big presentation that will make or break their career. That's because it's considered the perfect job, especially for men. You are creative like an artist, you actually make things like a craftsman, and you are well educated. At least in a lot of people's minds. Even among architects, the ones who get to design cool looking iconic buildings like Daniel Libeskind or Frank Gehry are pretty rare. What are you working on today, Dan? At yesterday's review, the client said he didn't like the millwork. I told him it was an example room to populate the floors we're designing, but he definitely thinks the millwork is bad because it reminds him of a building he toured a year ago and hated. I tried to ask his opinions about the conference and breakout room layout, but he kept asking why we put the millwork in the individual offices. So I guess I'm going to schedule another meeting after I remove all the millwork from the designs. Also soul destroying. Design these boxes rooms forever until you own the firm. Also you get paid so little and job security is terrible. Much happier being an engineer in construction instead. More money, more design without the 40-year wait. These days architects are more managers of the consulting engineers than anything else. Wish media had told me that before I went into it young. Big dicks. At work right now, so I'm not googling the stats, but if you've ever had the pleasure of perusing through the Craigslist personals, you should. It's gold. There are a ton of women wanting a guy with at least a 9 schlong. 9 inches must be larger than 90% of pornsters. That's your bottom limit? You have no idea how rare a dick over 9 inches long is. 2 former co-workers, women, once claimed that they believe 8 inches was the average dick size. They are setting themselves up for a life of disappointment. That's a fun joke I can't really do in text form. Why are women so bad at parking? Because men, having been telling them this, hold hands fairly close together, is 8 inches. Reminds me of my driving instructor. Learning how to park, I totally misjudged my distance to a parking car and he told me just because you tell your girlfriend that this, hold hands close together, is 30 centimeters every night doesn't mean that the distance to that car is 1 meter. I think they do that knowing that someone will claim to be 9 inches while really being in the realm of 6 inches. If they start off realistically, someone is going to try and pass off a 4 inches dick as 6+. Just my guess on the thought process behind that. There are only 13 advertising blimps in use around the world, yet it's so common to see them when there's a football game. The Goodyear blimp once almost crashed into our deer camp. We never even found out what it was doing there. The place is 20 miles from even the nearest highway, 50 miles from the nearest major city in Pennsylvania. My grandparents and I were sitting in the kitchen eating lunch, and the whole camp started to shake. We go outside, not knowing what it was, and the goddamn Goodyear blimp is floating 30 feet above the cabin. It hovered there for a good minute, picked up altitude, and went on its way. One of the damnedest things I've ever seen. Becoming a successful YouTuber. I am actually surprised at how many people can make a living on YouTube. It is almost an alien concept for a person who grew up watching skateboard fails on original YT. If you could somehow get this into the heads of the 3 million 12-year-olds trying to do Minecraft on YouTube spamming everywhere, you'd be a hero. Being in an airplane crash. It's 1 in a million, but a lot of people I know are still more scared to travel on a plane than in a car. Australian here. Know a guy so petrified of flying he elected to drive from the northernmost point of Australia to the southernmost point, then drive his car onto a boat which shipped them to Tasmania, then all the way back again. All told, this was about a 10,000 kilometer trip. They had other stops up the east coast. I'm not an expert, but I figure weighing up the 10,000 kilometer through outback Australia combined with major city CBDs on the way to the destination and the risk of death or serious injury, I can only imagine would be much higher than just flying for a few hours. Well, I'd say death of boredom is greatly increased as well. I used to make the trip from Victoria to Queensland by car every year, and going through country NSW has to be the most boring thing I have ever done. True story, met a bloke in Darwin once. Was his life dream to ride his motorcycle through central Australia from south to north to back again. Poor cunt made it to Darwin, then paid somebody to ship his bike back down south while he bought a plane ticket. Said it was the most boring trip of his life and he couldn't stand to do it twice. Always feel for those people spending 4 figures on tickets on the gun. Never seen Scrub before? You almost never see two guys walking across the street carrying a big pane of glass. I was on a college visit once and I saw two guys walking holding a big pane of glass. I took a good look because I know it will never happen again. I once slipped on a banana peel. I took a moment to really absorb it because I couldn't believe it had actually just happened. I had an old roommate try to explain that you couldn't really slip on a banana peel, it would just mush. So he proceeded to demonstrate by stepping on a banana peel and his leg went flying out from under him, causing him to fall in the most hilarious way possible. Autistic people being geniuses or savants. I work as a behavior therapist for autistic children. Many people seem to think that autism means a child is only socially awkward but incredibly book smart. The huge majority of the clients I work with are far behind in cognitive development, which leads to them being far behind in education and related areas like reading and basic math. Edit. I just wanted to add that I love my job and the clients I work with. I feel blessed to be able to work with them and they amaze me every day, regardless of their level of intelligence and functioning. Edit 2. This is not to say that savants or highly intelligent gifted people with autism don't exist. They do. And I have met them as well. Autism is a spectrum, so you will meet all types of people with it who are completely different. No single person with autism is exactly the same as any other. I was just pointing out that autistic geniuses are not as common as the media portrays. At least they're vaccinated. Well, fuck me, I just snorted some coffee out of my nose. I guess for the average person though, without personal experience through work or in their family, they are only going to encounter people with autism who function well enough. Burglary in the middle of the night. Burglary happens most often during the day, when nobody is home. No burglar wants to break in and try to sneak around your place while you're sleeping. His biggest concern is to evade detection. It makes more sense to work in the daytime. In all likelihood, that noise you heard outside was a car or raccoon or your imagination. Go to sleep. Epilepsy being fall to the floor, spaz uncontrollably, froth and all that due to flashing lights. Epilepsy is recurring seizures, and there are lots and lots of seizure types, and often they aren't noticeable, even immediately so for the sufferer. Triggers for these seizures are more likely to be hyperventilation, stress, alcohol or sleep deprivation, or stuff like that, than strobe lights. Epilepsy is also pretty common, and it's likely you go to school or work with someone who has it, in a reverse of the title. Ironically for this post though, the kind of epilepsy I have does have the stereotype. Go figure. My dad has severe epilepsy and I've seen him have seizures once. We were at the movies. Got out of the movie and the sudden brightness of daylight overloaded his senses and was too much. He froze in place with a 1,000-yard stare on his face and dropped his expensive camera. We were on vacation, and I knew what was happening. I sat him down on a bench and in a few minutes he was okay but tired and confused. I'm gonna go with T-Rex fossils. I at least thought they were rather common since my local museum had like 3. There are something like only 2-4 dozen ever found in the world, and only about 12 skulls. Edit. Guess it is about 50. Was going on memory. Still a bit low if you ask me, considering how much we talk about dinos. Edit 2. Since everyone keeps thinking they are replicas casts, it is the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles which has at least 3 T-Rex. When I was little, I also didn't realize how lucky I was to have such a huge and wonderful museum nearby. Now we have the Endeavour right next to it. ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation after CPR. I believe the actual success rate is 3%, and those people are very likely to have brain damage. Media would have you thinking it's a great catch-all for any unconscious person. Here's the thing though, a lot of times the CPR isn't what gets them circulating on their own again. What it does however is maintain blood flow so that by the time they get the treatment that will get them pumping again, they are less likely to have brain damage. Yes, the success rate is low. Even lower if it's performed poorly. But even 3% is better than 0%. This. The MBTA cop that got shot in the gunfight with the Boston bombers supposedly went through a ton of blood as EMTs kept him on IV and constant CPR till they got him to the hospital. Somehow he woke up with remarkably little issues besides some nerve damage in his leg and total memory loss from that night. I never heard if he had any lingering effects though. Hitting a jackpot. That's why casinos exist and are hugely profitable. Hell. Late last year in my city a woman won $1.2 million just on a VLT at a local bar. Great for her, but you know it lead to an increase in people burning through their paychecks on those machines. Being able to make it as a musician or actor or many other creative jobs. And by making it I mean being able to earn some serious money or even just to make a living by just performing and not doing anything else. Most of the time, you will have to have multiple side projects that only roughly are related to actually performing. Or so I've heard. If there are people with personal experience in these fields, I'd love to read your comments. I have a friend that's an amazing songwriter. He has written with and for many famous bands and artists, lots of people you've heard on the radio. He has been nominated for a Grammy twice, once in the last year or two. He has to work side jobs to make ends meet in between royalty checks. There is just no money in music anymore unless you are Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga. Even someone like him? That proves my point more than I would have thought. Thanks for sharing. Astronomer here. Total solar eclipses. Hear me out, obviously, we know that they're not common at any given point on Earth, but you'll have about one a year somewhere on the planet. So it's not unreasonable to see one if you plan a little. But with that context, it turns out our moon is the only moon we know of that is the exact same size of the sun in our sky. Mars's moons for example are captured asteroids too puny to cover the sun's disk, and the further out you go the planet's moons are so big it more than covers the tiny size of the disk. So, with that, 100% of total solar eclipses where you actually get the sun obscured and see the corona and all that jazz happens on Earth. And this effect won't happen forever either because the moon is moving away from us a few inches a year. In a few 100 million years no one will see total solar eclipses anymore. My dream is that one day, Earth will be a galactic tourist hotspot because of this. I'm fairly certain that the Earth is going to be demolished to make way for the new Hyperspace Express route. I've seen the plans, they are on display. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.